the sprawling deserts, the long shots of a vast canvas, and immediately cutting to tight close-ups of the protagonists with some haunting background music and a very, very strong emotional content. Yes, that's right. These are all the common trademarks of the movies of JP Dutta. In today's episode, I will be talking about the career and cinema of JP Dutta. JP Dutta's father, OP Dutta, was a filmmaker in the 40s and 50s, and he made movies like Ek Nazar and Pyar Ki Kahani and other such movies. They're all in the 40s and 50s, starring stars like Nalini Jayawant, Noor Jahan and others. And so it was, I guess, quite natural that his son would also follow his footsteps in becoming a filmmaker. JP Dutta started his film career assisting Randhir Kapoor during the making of Dharam Karam in 74-75. And it was then after that he decided to make his first own movie. The movie that JP Dutta launched was Sarhad, and the star cast was pretty impressive. It had Vinod Khanna, Bindya Goswami, Mithun Chakravarti, Nasiruddin Shah, Smita Patel and Om Puri in the lead roles. Sarhad had quite an interesting storyline. The story was of these two childhood friends who as children grew up together and were the best of friends, and then they get separated by fate and end up facing one another on opposite sides of the border as soldiers. So it was, I thought it was quite an interesting premise in which the movie was set in. Sarhad was launched in, I think, 76. Unfortunately, the movie got stuck because of financial problems, and then Vinod Khanna left the industry to join Osho, and the film was shelved forever, shelved for good. And it's unfortunate because had Sarhad been completed and released, it perhaps would have been the first major films for almost the entire cast barring Vinod Khanna. You know, most of them would be making their debut or really early movies with Sarhad. Unfortunately, it didn't get made, and JP Dutta had to wait for nearly a decade before his first movie would actually release, and that was the stunning, brilliant Gulami. Gulami also had a very, very impressive ensemble cast of Dharmendra, Nasiruddin Shah, Mithun Chakravarti, Reena Roy, Smita Patel, Anita Raj, Kulbhushan Kharbanda, and a whole host of others. And Gulami is this epic drama set in the backdrops of Rajasthan, which would go on to become a speciality for JP Dutta. But Gulami was the first film, of his, which was set in Rajasthan, and it spoke of this struggle of class and caste between the Thakurs and the Chaudhurys, and it was an absolutely brilliant movie. And I think at that phase in the 80s, when qualitatively commercial Hindi cinema was going through a dip, makers like JP Dutta ushered in a new promise of good commercial cinema, sensible commercial cinema. Gulami was the beginning of all that. It had absolutely fantastic performances from Nasir, Mithun Chakravarti, Kulbhushan Kharbanda, who would go on to become a regular in almost every JP Dutta movie in important roles. And topping it all, the performance of Dharmendra as Ranjit Singh Chaudhary. I think he was absolutely fabulous, and I think it could be seen as perhaps one of the last great roles Dharmendra did in his illustrious career, because post mid-80s, Gulami was released in 85, but post that, in the later part of the 80s, when Dharmendra, he enjoyed a very successful stint at the box office around 87, 88, but qualitatively his movies had really, really gone down the drain. And it was, I think, Gulami which would be one of his last really good performances in a good movie. Anyway, Gulami went on to become a super hit, and JP Dutta was he had arrived. And following Gulami in 1988, Dharmendra had signed him for his home production, Yatim, starring Sunny Deol, Farha, Danny, Sujata Mehta, and yet again Kulbhushan Kharbanda in a very important role. Yatim again was a fabulous movie. The common link, again, it was set in Rajasthan like Gulami, but the really strong common link in all of JP Dutta's movies would be the really high emotional content. There was action and there was music and everything in his movies, like any commercial movie, but the emotional content in his movies was very high. And same with Yatim, the story of an orphan, the son of a dacoit who was killed by a police inspector, and then the inspector brings up the dacoit's son and raises him as his own child, is what Yatim is about. And Sunny Deol, Kulbhushan Kharbanda, Amrish Puri, Danny, all of them put in absolutely fabulous performances. And unfortunately, Yatim didn't do very well at the box office when it was released. But 30 years, 35 years down the line today, Yatim has been recognized as a brilliant movie, and just has the stamp of JP Dutta all over the movie. Brilliant. Following Yatim, JP Dutta made his next movie, which was Hathiar. Again, an ensemble star cast of Dharmendra, Rishi Kapoor, Sanjay Dutt, Amrita Singh, Asha Parekh, Sangeeta Bijlani, who made her debut in the movie, and yes, Kulbhushan Kharbanda in yet again a very important role. Now, Hathiar, unlike Gulami and Yatim, wasn't entirely set in Rajasthan. There were bits and parts of it in Rajasthan, but it was primarily set in the city of Bombay. And one thing which I would love to mention when talking about JP Dutta is the brilliant, absolutely fabulous cinematography in his movie, all thanks to the great Ishwar Bidri, who was the cameraman in most of his movies. JP Dutta's Gulami, Yatim, they captured that vast canvas of the deserts of Rajasthan and the landscape so beautifully. And yet, when he shifted to an urban backdrop, as Hathiar was set in Bombay, the grittiness of the city, the dark side of the city, the alleys and bylanes, and the way Bombay was seen through the lens of Ishwar Bidri was absolutely fascinating. Hathiar again is this wonderfully emotionally charged movie about the quintessential wild boy, who else but Sanjay Dutt, and his peacenik father, Kulbhushan Kharbanda, who leaves his family in Rajasthan, his brothers in Rajasthan, who are feudal and violent and always picking up a gun at the slightest of pretext, and he comes to Bombay to make a living with his family, his wife Asha Parekh and his son Sanjay Dutt. But Sanjay Dutt has that wild streak in him which keeps on getting him in trouble, and how he meets up with Dharmendra, who's the don of the city, and the equation he and Sanjay Dutt have. And there is also Rishi Kapoor in a fabulous role where he plays Dharmendra's younger brother, and he's also a peacenik, and he's left his brother because he doesn't support the things that Dharmendra does, and Rishi Kapoor stays separately. In fact, he is Sanjay Dutt's neighbor and tries to put Sanjay Dutt on a right path, on a proper path, but he's this quintessential bad boy, and he's attracted to crime, and how he gets engulfed by that same crime is what Hathiar is all about. According to me, it's my personal favorite JP Dutta movie, Hathiar, and someday I want to make a special episode only talking about Hathiar. Anyway, this is a JP Dutta episode, so I'll move on from Hathiar. as favorite a film as it is of mine. And unfortunately, Hathyar also didn't do well. I'm till date, surprised at the fact that a movie like Hathyar didn't do well at the box office, and I can see no reason why. But it didn't do well, and JP Dutta then moved on to yet another Rajasthan desert epic saga, which was Batwara. And thematically, Batwara was closer to his first film, Gulami. Again speaking of the divide in caste and class, and the Thakurs and the Chaudhurys. And this time it, with that backdrop, it spoke of the friendship of Vikram Singh and Sumer. Sumer being played by Dharmendra and Vikram Singh being Vinod Khanna. And like most of his movies, it again had an ensemble cast. Apart from Dharmendra and Vinod Khanna, there was Dimple Kapadia, Amrita Singh, Mohsin Khan, Shami Kapoor, Asha Parekh, huge star cast, and Amrish Puri as the main antagonist in the movie. And yet again, visually spectacular, strong emotional content, and yet, like Yatim and Hathyar earlier, despite being acclaimed and well received by the critics, Batwara didn't do well again. It, I think, was just about an average grosser, and made its money, recovered its cost, but it wasn't a hit. His only big hit really being Gulami till then. And the ball kept on rolling for JP Dutta, and the next movie he made was, I think, one of the biggest star casts, at least till that time, Kshatriya, which had Sunil Dutt, Sanjay Dutt, Dharmendra, Sunny Deol, Vinod Khanna, Raveena Tandon, and Divya Bharti, Kabir Bedi, and a whole host of others. Meenakshi Seshadri also had an important role. And Kshatriya again did commercially okay. It wasn't a super hit, but it sort of managed to recover its cost. But qualitatively, I wouldn't say Kshatriya was in the same league as his earlier films, Gulami, Batwara, Yatim, or Hathyar. There was, I think, an early indication that JP Dutta was keeping the box office in mind when he was making his movies, incorporating some commercial elements which perhaps were dictated by the distributors, by what the market wanted. And it wasn't, at least to me, it didn't feel like a film straight from the heart like all his earlier movies felt. Kshatriya felt like a midway compromise between what JP Dutta believed in and what he thought the box office dictated. After Kshatriya, JP Dutta made the film perhaps with which he is most associated with and known by, which was Border, based on the Longewal battle in 1971 between India and Pakistan. Border was his first full-fledged film with an army backdrop. And again, Sunny Deol, Jackie Shroff, Akshay Khanna, Sunil Shetty, huge star cast movie. And Border was this absolute smash hit. Border had some songs which became very popular. Sande Se Aate Hain became a chart buster. And overall, I think Border's success really opened the door for war movies and patriotic films to be made. Border came in 1997, 26 years earlier. But Border definitely revived the trend of patriotism at that scale. Patriotism earlier was restricted to Manoj Kumar making his Bharat movies. But Border took it, at a much bigger scale, and the success was phenomenal. But again, when I look back at JP Dutta's career, I feel there is JP Dutta till Border and JP Dutta beyond Border. JP Dutta himself, incidentally, in an interview once said that he felt a little sad and hurt by the success of Border. And he says that I find it hurtful when people only think of me as the director of Border, whereas I happen to have made several other good films, and yet I'm only known for Border, or as the maker of Border. So JP Dutta himself did feel a bit bracketed and restricted because of the super success of Border. Post Border, he made more war movies like LOC Kargil, which again was a huge star-studded affair. Unfortunately flopped, and I think one of the reasons why it flopped was its length. It was inordinately long, and qualitatively it's very difficult to find faults in the JP Dutta movie. Technically always brilliant, and he had a certain quality benchmark which could never be questioned. But LOC flopped, and I think JP Dutta fell saddled by this huge success of Border and this constant think of him being associated with Border. And I think, and I have no idea, I have no information backing my thoughts, but I personally feel that JP Dutta wanted to make something different from a Border and an LOC, which is why he made Umrao Jaan, which I think, given the kind of filmmaker he is, his sensibilities, I personally, again a personal view, I think it was a wrong choice. I don't think JP Dutta would have put his heart as much as he would in a Gulami or Yatim in an Umrao Jaan. Again, maybe I am wrong. Maybe that's not the case. But this is as a fan of JP Dutta's cinema, his kind of cinema, I feel that Umrao Jaan was not his kind of cinema, not something he should have tapped into. Anyway, he did tap into Umrao Jaan, starring Abhishek Bachchan and Aishwarya Rai, and it was a colossal flop. It was a huge flop. Talking of Abhishek Bachchan, I missed out Abhishek's debut movie, which was also made by JP Dutta, the brilliant and beautiful and yet criminally underrated Refugee. I thought it took a lot of courage on the part of Abhishek Bachchan and Kareena Kapoor to make their debuts in a movie like Refugee, because being the star children that they are, they could have easily got a quintessential love story, a teeny bopper, bubblegum romance kind of a movie to launch themselves. Their families chose not to. Their families, in fact, left it to JP Dutta to launch them, and he did so with the wonderfully made Refugee. Both Abhishek and Kareena were fabulous in the movie. Unfortunately, it didn't do very well. I think there's also a mindset issue where people see star children in their debut movies. The expectation is perhaps of a certain type of cinema, which Refugee definitely wasn't. But all said and done, I think it's a great movie, and today if you revisit it 20 years later, I think it holds good. It's a beautiful movie. JP Dutta, after the failure of Umrao Jaan, I think he took a hiatus of about a decade where there was nothing made from him. There kept on rumors circulated about Border 2 being made, or some new movie of his, which never materialized. And eventually he made Paltan, yet again another movie with a war backdrop. And this one was about the skirmishes between India and China, the Nathula and Chola passes. And Paltan flopped as well. And that was the last movie we saw of JP Dutta. I don't know whether he will make yet another movie again or not. As I had said about another favorite director of mine from the 80s in an earlier episode, Rahul Ravel. Similar to Rahul Ravel, if JP Dutta decides not to make any more movie from now on, I think he has done enough. He has left us with enough great movies for us to cherish and savor. And people like me who are huge fans of the 70s and 80s commercial Hindi cinema will always hold JP Dutta in a very, very in very high esteem. He was a fabulous filmmaker, a great craftsman, technically absolutely brilliant. And as I said, his movie was just not technique driven. There were really strong emotional resonance in his movie. And I think every successful or every critically acclaimed movie of JP Dutta bears that strong emotional resonance, be it a Gholami, a Yatim, a Hathyar, or a Batwara, or even Refugee. I think they're so strong on emotions that it's very hard not to like those movies. I'm a great fan of JP Dutta, and I hope I have told you about a few films of his, maybe which you might have missed out. And for those who thought JP Dutta was just border and nothing more, I hope this episode has clarified that and told you that he's made many a great movie even before Border. So do watch some of his movies in case you haven't, and even if you have, it's always great to revisit one of his classic movies. That's all for this episode, and until the next time, bye bye.